I'm excited to be here. We got a huge crowd here, so I'm excited to give you guys the goods and really build off of what Matt shared for the last 30, 45 minutes. Matt and I sell very similarly, and so today I'm going to be talking about concept selling. And a lot of the way he gave his message, there's a lot of similar threads on selling through concepts. So as I'm going through my message today, you might also hear a few similar overlaps. If you hear those things, that means if you didn't write it down the first time, definitely want to write it down the second time because it helps both of us sell, obviously, at a really high level. Also, just want to acknowledge everybody who is here today. I'm sure some of you probably maybe had questions of like, oh, should I go? Should I not go to NET? I got to buy a flight, all these things. And I'm sure after even just Matt's talk, you got a ton of value that if implemented and executed, you'll see huge return on your investment. So let's make some noise for Matt's message really quick. And really quick also, raise your hand if it's your, and hi, first ever NET meeting. All right, let's give them a round of applause. Also, just to get an idea of like who we have in the audience, if you sold less than $100,000 last year, raise your hand just so I can see. All right, keep your hands raised. If you sold under $200,000, raise your hand. I'm trying to see where the general mass population is here. 300,000, keep your hands raised. If anything under 300,000, awesome. So that's the majority of the room. Sweet. Very good. So concept closing. I want you guys to write this down. Concept closing is getting customers bought into an idea. It's painting a vision for customers and showing how it aligns with what they're looking for. And if you think back to Matt's message, there was a lot of that, right? It's painting a vision. It's getting them bought into the concept, right, of the Cutco kitchen. I have 4 benefits here that are the main reasons for why you want to start to move your sales process with the idea of concept selling. First one, it's a better way for customers to understand and relate to the options you are showing. At the end of the day, it's becoming more relatable. That's the first reason why we want to do this. Second reason, helps you be more strategic in your ability to drop down. It gives you a better framework. When you have a better framework, you can move more effortlessly from option to option versus show an ultimate 3K option, drop all the way down to like 2 pieces within 2 minutes. It's like, what happened, right? And so learning how to drop down more slowly, more intentionally. Third, customers are paying less attention to the details and more to the idea. That's what you want. You don't want customers paying attention to the details because what that does is elongate your sales process. And when you're at an event, you want to shorten it. You want to get in and out as quickly as possible because we've all been there talking to a customer. Sales process takes too long. You have that one person waiting to come up and buy. And if you just ended 30 seconds earlier, you would have gotten that walk-up ultimate. We've all been there, including myself. So how do you shorten the sales process? And it's less granular and more about the idea. The fourth, it's one of the biggest needle movers to increase your average order and have larger 4K plus orders. It shifts your small orders into medium-sized orders, your medium to large, and so on and so forth. So when I create a concept for a customer, my outcome is pretty simple. It's to create something that when the customer hears it, they're like, oh, I relate to this. That's for me. It's really an option to help fit the mold of what the customer is looking for. Another big advantage of concept closing is the creativity aspect. A lot of these packages that you see from Vast Action, a lot of these different options and bundles have come from top CSPs in this room. And being able to get creative on how you create packages will help you sell more. I think to a story where I was working with a customer and they wanted a homemaker, and they said, Brandon, I'm not gonna use the butcher knife, I'm not gonna use the carving set, I really don't need that turning fork, I'm not gonna use that spatula either, and we're not gonna use all the steak knives. And we don't even want a block, we have a small kitchen, okay? And they were very clear and concise with saying those things. Now, in that situation, right, I could have said, well, what pieces do you like, right? And they pick out 1 or 2 or 3 pieces and it turns into just 200 CPO. And in that moment, I was listening to everything the customer was saying, and I asked myself, how can I create a package? What kind of concept can I put together for the customer that will make them feel as if, yes, this is for me? And just like that, I said, hey, Mrs. Jones, we actually have this option. It's called a 4x4 package. And essentially the way it works is you get to hand pick the 4 knives you'll use the most, and it's paired with 4 steak knives. And it doesn't come with a block. We bundle it all together. And it sounds like that would be the perfect option for you based on what you're sharing with me. And I knew in that moment, I was able to take what initially showing a set that was 2K, and instead of selling 200 CPO, I could drop that down to about 1,000 CPO. And so being able to get creative in how you create bundle packages to maximize the CPO. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on the kitchen package. Matt did a great job at that. But the biggest thing that I really want to highlight that he said, in case you missed it, was, Mrs. Jones, this option is for people who just remodeled their kitchen, just bought a new house, or they're tired of their old beat up stuff that they've had since they were married. And so you can gut everything in your kitchen, get everything Cutco, American made, guaranteed forever, it's one and done. And really, I want to explain the why behind this. Is this concept, right, is I want to cast the net as wide as possible when I'm working with a customer. So I want to say as many things as I can that the customer is going to possibly relate to. Right? So did they just remodel? Did they just buy a new house? Are they just tired of their old stuff? Have they had it for 10, 20, 30 years? If I say all those things, the chances of them hearing one of them and saying, oh, that's me, increases. And so the wider I can cast that net, the more likely it is that they're going to be open to the concept, open to the idea. So let's talk about knife sets really quick. When it comes to the 3 main sets, I want to just touch on how I talk about each of them. So we got our basic, our family, and our complete. Hey, Mrs. Jones, this is our basic set. This is for people who don't do a lot of cooking and just want the bare essentials. You get a couple meat knives, bread, vegetable, a couple utility knives, a paring knife, and a set of steak knives. That's my names and uses for the basic set. It's like 10 seconds. And if you notice, when I talk about it, I'm like, hey, this is the set for people who don't do a lot of cooking, right? Who just want the basics. And so if my framework is that's who this set is for, then my average order, right, across the board is going to increase because the people are like, oh, I don't cook a lot. I must need the basic set. Family set is pretty easy to sell, obviously, because it comes with our 4 top sellers. All right, so if you want to have the customer favorites, Mrs. Jones, this is the set to go with. And then we have our complete set. This is everybody's dream set. This is the set everybody wants. Maybe not everybody gets, but it is the set that people work towards. Mrs. Jones, if you like to barbecue, entertain, enjoy cooking, or you just like to have the peace of mind of knowing that you'll have the right tool for the right job, this is the set to go with. Now, obviously this is our most expensive set, but it's also our largest discounted set. So I would say if you can see yourself using the pieces and you can fit it in the budget, it's our #1 deal. Sound familiar? Matt just said it. All right, and I'm saying it again because it works. Matt was, I think, #1 in ultimate sales. I was #2 or 3. And so it helps us be more effective in selling sets across the board. And again, I'm casting a wider net. Do you like to barbecue? Do you like to entertain? Do you enjoy cooking? Or do you enjoy just having, the right tool for the right job? So going from block sets, let's get into smaller orders. Smaller orders are never fun to talk about on stage and how to navigate those, but the reality is it happens to all of us. We all get those smaller orders. And so if we can get more efficient, more effective at turning small orders into larger orders, that across the board is going to increase our average order. So let's say we have a past customer, walks up, they already own Cutco, and they're like, hey, I want one piece. I want a cheese knife, I want shears. Let's say that's the situation. What do you do in that scenario? Do you write up the order? Do you try to sell them a 5-piece right off the bat? What do you do? And these are good situations to practice and role play because they're going to happen. So I want to go over a series of questions that I ask when a customer walks up and they're like, hey, I need a pair of scissors. And these are all questions, by the way, you've heard, but I'm going to share them with you and tell you why I asked them so you can understand more so of what I'm looking for behind the question. So the first one is, what do you already have? Sounds like you're a Cutco owner. Which pieces do you have? I want to know what they have already. So that way, when I suggest the piece later, I'm not like, hey, do you have the spatula? Yeah, I have it. Hey, do you have the cheese knife? Yeah, I have that one. And then you keep asking, and they keep saying, yeah, I have this, I have this, I have this. If you ask 2 or 3 times, and they already have those, you're losing credibility because they then think, what? I have every piece. There's nothing you can show me that I don't have. So instead, if you just ask, hey, show me what you have already, you're learning what they already have. And then you can be more strategic. Another great question to ask, did you buy them all at once? Or did you buy over time? Why do I want to ask that? Because I want to know, are they used to buying pieces or are they used to buying a set? And if they're used to buying pieces, I need to make sure the rest of my approach is getting them moving towards the concept of a package or a block set. How long ago did you buy Cutco? Biggest mistake you can make is, oh, they already have Cutco, they're already sold on the value. I don't need to do a price comparison. I don't need to do any price positioning. Big mistake. If they bought 20 years ago, they don't remember the price of Cutco. Shoot, if they bought 5 years ago, they probably don't know the price of Cutco. And then the last question I like to ask is, how were you introduced to Cutco? I want to know, are they used to buying at Costco and Costco pricing? Are they used to buying at a show, a new rep? So once I've collected all of these answers to the questions, I now have way more data points and clarity of who my customer is and how I can best serve them. And so at that point, I then start to show them pieces they don't have. And it's helpful because I already know what they have bought over the years. And my goal is to entice them with things that they would use based on the information they've already given me. And you know you have them at a good point in the sales process if they say, well, how much is this one? And it's different than the one they initially walked up for. So when they start asking about the knives that you've been showing them, hey, what's the price of this? What's the price of this? Then that means that you're opening their mind up to other things that they would be interested in. So with these customers, right, a past customer, they own Cutco, they come up for one piece. There's 3 main opportunities that I'm looking for with these kind of customers. And I'm gonna just name the 3 and I'll go into each one a little bit here. So the first one is a new set. If they have just a couple pieces, I'm looking to see if there's an opportunity for me to sell a new set of Cutco to them. And I'll talk about that in a second. The second one is upgrade, right? Which most of you know, but we'll touch on that as well. That's another concept, is the upgrade program. And then the third is the companion set, which the framework of that, the concept of that is different than a 5-piece starter kit. So when it comes to a new set option, if they only have a couple pieces, right, I want to get them bought into the idea of just buying a whole new set. Hey, Mrs. Jones, it's really rare to actually see us here. We don't come here very often. This event happens once a year. So we actually have special pricing on our block sets. So we've had a lot of customers who have come to the booth who have a few pieces like you do, realize how great they are and that they want to add more to the collection, but they also don't want to pay individual pricing because it's a lot more expensive. So a lot of them will just take advantage of one of our block sets so they can get a whole new set, get rid of anything else they have in their kitchen of other brands, and that way they're one and done. Right? That's a concept, right? And so I'm reframing for them the idea of, oh, they were just going to buy a couple pieces. Let's dangle the carrot and see if they would be open to the idea of doing a new set. And I would probably say $30, $40, maybe $50,000 of my year last year was this idea, right? And it starts with you looking for the opportunity. And then, of course, the few pieces they already own, what do? They give them as a gift. Upgrade option, this is probably well used amongst everyone in this group, but since we do have some first-time attendees, second-time attendees, I want to make sure we're doing best practices when it comes to upgrade options. Hey, Mrs. Jones, we have this option for customers, literally just like you, where they have a few pieces, they love Cutco, they've been wanting to add to their collection, but they also don't want to pay individual prices because it's a lot more expensive. So we created something called an upgrade program. You keep the pieces you have, you just get the pieces you're missing, comes with a new block, and that new block will hold everything you own plus everything that would complement your collection. And the key here, right, if you hear the language I'm using, is I'm wanting to make it as relatable as possible to them. I'm saying, hey, the situation you're in is the type of customer that would do this upgrade. And so they automatically think, oh, this is for me. This is what I should be considering, what I should look at. And then there's the companion set. The companion set is pretty simple as far as like how you get them bought into that. It's 5 pieces as well, but again, this is a past customer. And so you can tell them when a customer says, hey, how much is this knife? I'll never give them the price of one knife individually. I'll just say, hey, just to give you general pricing, if you look at all the knives here across the board, the average knife is about 150 bucks. Some are more if it's big and heavy like this cleaver. Some are a little less if it's like this paring knife. But generally speaking, everything's about 150 bucks, more or less. And I do that because I don't want to get, again, caught up in the granular part of like, how much is this? How much is this? How much is this? I want to be an open book. Hey, this is how much everything costs roughly. You can buy them individually, but it's way more expensive. So we actually have a custom package called a 5-piece companion set, where you can get 5 pieces that complement what you already have. This is also like a really good option for customers who don't want like steak knives, don't like bigger blocks, and so you try the upgrade and they're like, no, I don't want a block. It won't fit on my counter, and you try and try and try. They're like, I would never use all those steak knives, and I refuse to even consider them. You're like, all right. You have some of those like hard-headed customers, and you're like, all right, I got to pivot. All right, find the path of least resistance. And then the last little piece that I want to touch on specifically with 5 pieces, shifting gears slightly, is with new customers. A lot of what I just shared obviously correlates over to a new customer. But the reason why I'm spending a little extra time on the 5-piece range is because a 5-piece special, if done correctly, is about 550 CPO, right? You're not discounting it. It's not a buy 4, get 1 free, right? You're not charging a rep account. It's 5 pieces at regular price. And that's about 550 CPO. So if your average order is 400 to 600-ish, right, you're in the range of a 5-piece. But what that actually tells me is if you have like a $400 to $600 average order, that means you have a lot of orders that are $100, $200, $300. And so the question I immediately ask, if I was in your shoes, is, well, how can I bring those orders and move them up higher? So my new baseline isn't 100, 200 CPO. My new baseline is 550 CPO, and then everything goes up from there. So you get those customers, they walk up, they're a new customer, they're like, how much is the chef knife? I only use the chef knife, and that's what I use for everything. Or they'll say, I don't cook a lot. I literally just use one knife for everything. At that point, same kind of framework, right? Hey, if you want to buy them individually, you can, but do you mind if I just make a few other suggestions that I think would be a nice complement to the chef knife? Again, asking permission. And if they grant that permission, right, now you have a little bit of runway. And I use an analogy. And my analogy has to do with shoes. Some of you may have heard of this, but it's like, hey, Mrs. Jones, knives are kind of like shoes. Could you get away with one knife, just like one pair of shoes, and use it for everything? Of course. You could have one pair of shoes, you could go to the gym, you could go to a beach, you could go to a nice dinner, you go for a walk, right? You could have one pair of shoes for everything. But we all know if we were to go into your closet, you probably have 10, 15 pairs. Why? Because if you go to these different places, a nice dinner, the beach, go to the gym, you have different styles of shoes. And not only do you have different styles of shoes, you probably have different colors to go with all the different outfits, right? And so those shoes, that concept of the shoes is very similar to the knives. Sure, you could get away with one knife, but having the right tool for the right job will keep the knives sharper longer, and you'll actually have a better experience all around when you have the right tools that complement each other. And I find when I do this, it helps them break out of the framework of like, oh, I gotta buy one knife, right? Because I got permission, they allowed me into their house, figuratively, and now I'm able to show them a vision and a concept of how this is gonna help them. All right, the next category or program that I want to talk about and how to sell conceptually is around gifts and the family program. So the biggest concept here is selling gifts practically, functionally, and useful, right? That's how I sell it. And my approach is probably different than most people when it comes to like how I get people bought into the idea of selling Cutco as a gift or giving Cutco as a gift to like friends and family specifically. But if you can get really good at this, it's gonna give you a 5x opportunity with each customer. Technically, the most a customer can spend for like their own physical kitchen is, call it 10, 12 grand. As soon as you get them bought into the idea of wanting to buy for their kids, friends, and family members, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6x, right, with that same customer. So I normally will start off by saying, would you ever consider giving Cutco as a gift? And I'm not afraid if they tell me no. If they're like, oh, no, I would never do that. Too expensive. I don't love anybody that much. We've all heard that, right? No worries, Mrs. Jones. I understand. Here's the thing. You know, typically when we give gifts, right, a lot of the gifts we give tend to be consumable, right? They don't last very long. They're short-lived. Take you, for example, right? I want you to take a moment and think about all the gifts you've received in your entire lifetime. Birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries, wedding gifts, housewarming, just because gifts. And I want you to imagine we put all the gifts in this room that you've received over the last 40, 50 years. And if I were to ask you, of all the gifts you've received in your lifetime, how many of those gifts do you still have today that you've owned for at least 10 years? I'm willing to bet that this room full of gifts would shrink to a small corner of the room. Now, Mrs. Jones, what if I were to ask you, of the gifts that we have left, how many of those gifts do you use every single day? I would be willing to guess that there probably wouldn't be any more gifts in that room or in this room, maybe one or two. Visual, concept, right? So now they see it. And so that's why people buy Cutco as a gift, because even though it might be unconventional, even though it's something that you might have never considered, it's the one gift you can give and have 100% certainty that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, not only will they still own it, but they will have used it every single day for the rest of their life. So again, just bringing this talk together, it's like the concept. It's less about the individual gift, what piece they choose for which kid, but the idea. I'm going to skip over the flatware concept and the cookware concept because Matt did a great job on those with the kitchen. Last couple of things I'll just share here is I want to give you 4 just simple questions / statements that you can use, and you can really apply this wherever you want with any product that you're selling within Cutco, or product line, I should say, within Cutco. So the first is the concept of value. Selling on value instead of price. If you sell on value instead of price, your CPO will be higher. So one of the questions I like to ask is, what else can you buy that you know you'll use every single day and have for the rest of your life? And when you ask that question, pause, like give the customer a chance to really think and respond to that. All right, so that concept is built around value. There's also the concept of one and done. Imagine how nice it'll be to buy it once, never have to buy it again. Knowing you can pass it down to your kids and they're gonna have the same warranty. It's a multi-generational product. There's also the concept of clean out the drawer, which I initially heard from Josh Mueller several years ago. It's now been integrated amongst the room and the top CSPs. But get rid of all the kitchen tools you've had for decades and consolidate with high quality American-made products. Again, it's less about each tool that comes in the accessory package and more about the idea of decluttering. And the last concept here is it's the best return on your investment. I love when customers are like, I don't know, it's expensive. And my response is, you're right, Mrs. Jones, it is expensive. But when you think of how long you'll own it for and how frequently you'll use it, it's one of the best returns on your investment. And so I take that immediate, like, oh, it's expensive from the customer to, oh, that makes sense. And they immediately move over to the other bucket of, I see the value. I see why it makes sense. We spend $2,000 on new iPhones every 2 years. You might as well allocate that money towards something that's going to last you the rest of your life. So practice these concepts, hone your skills around this area, and what you're going to find is that you're going to close quicker through relating, you're going to be able to drop up or drop down faster, and you'll be able to increase your average order. Thank you, guys.